Sure, I'll do a quick introduction. I'm really excited to have Glenn and Nick to present Trusted Caller ID for a few reasons. One is because this is a real world application of these digital identity and verifiable credential and governance, the digital trust technologies that we've all been working so hard to promote for all these years. And it's great to see these solutions come together in a real world environment. And we've had a lot of discussions over the years about why these technologies are so hard to develop, and we've seen that there are challenges in the business case or the use case for these technologies, and then on the other side is the user experience. And I think we'll see today that this specific solution has some really good answers to those two areas. So I'll just turn it over to Nick and Glenn.
I'll pass over to Glenn to kind of run through the kind of initial slides. Quick intro. My name's Nick Lambert. I've been working the decentralized technology space for probably about 15 years or so, and really the last 6 years as the CEO of Doc Labs. Doc Labs is a technology provider working in decentralized identity solutions. We provide technology to a range of companies across the globe. And I really appreciate the opportunity to join you guys today and talk you through this solution or this POC. Glenn, can I pass over to you and just kind of let me know when you want me to shunt things along?
Yeah, thanks very much. Well, thanks for the opportunity to talk to you all about Trusted Caller Identity today. I'm Glenn Pover. I'm at Telefónica Tech, which is Telefónica's global digital solutions business. And so we are offering cloud and IoT, big data, and cybersecurity services to our business customers in our main markets, which is UK, Spain, Germany, and Brazil, with about 350 million subscribers. So we're a leading global telco. But I guess in terms of the solution part, I'm more on the innovation side, and I've spent the last 10 years developing APIs, which have been put out in the market and developed to solve mostly identity use cases. So I guess I fell into identity by accident. I've got 22 years in O2 and now Telefónica. But I think more and more when you look at the problems that we're trying to solve, and especially when you get into agentic AI, then identity becomes core to everything that we do. And ironically, of course, go back to 1992 when we had our first GSM services launched. We built identity into the core of that architecture with this subscriber identity module, otherwise known as a SIM card, and we still have the SIM card today. We've just never really leveraged it outside our own ecosystem. It's been very, very secure within our ecosystem for 6, 7, 8 billion subscribers and IoT devices. But I think now we've had the opportunity with APIs and global initiatives like Open Gateway and Kamara, where we're standardizing APIs to actually allow businesses to innovate on top of our capabilities, as well as doing our own innovation. So I think it's exciting times in the telco world. It's not known for its, I guess, innovation or kind of high speed. But we are critical infrastructure in many countries in which we operate, certainly the countries in which Telefónica operates. And so, as critical infrastructure, we need to ensure we are building, developing, running mission critical services, to high SLAs, supporting quite often government services, defense capabilities as well. So, we're very mindful of that, and our commitments to the societies and the governments and the countries where we operate. Next, please. So jumping straight into the POC, Trusted Caller Identity, could you jump on one, please? Nick, thank you. So this kind of came out of some discussions with GSMA, but also some partners, I guess mid last year. But actually, more importantly, it came out of actually a discussion with one of the UK banks where we were understanding that impersonation fraud does not just happen to subscribers or to consumers, but actually impersonation fraud happens into relying parties, and in this case, into their call centers. by scammers and fraudsters, and they're impersonating, you know, customers like you and me, with enough stolen data or phish data that they can pass the fairly basic security checks, usually knowledge-based authentication checks, sometimes with additional things like caller line identity, which is one of the original methods in telecoms networks to identify customers when they call by their phone number. Sometimes with additional methods like SMS OTPs, but again, we know that the SMS OTPs and SIM swaps are quite challenged these days if you've got scammers, particularly in targeted attacks, that really want to take over accounts. So based upon the market insight that impersonation with fraud was happening into call centers of big brands and money was being lost, sometimes millions of pounds, I kind of took that as the cue to actually kick off this POC, which we ended up calling Trusted Caller Identity. We got a sponsorship in the GSMA Foundry. So GSMA is our global trade association, and they have a Foundry unit which sponsors and funds proofs of concepts. And they supported us through to our big show of the year, which is Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, where we have 100,000 people, and Nick and I were there to show off the demo. But really, you know, what is Trusted Caller Identity all about? It's really about leveraging the operator assets of the SIM cards and some of the APIs we're building about understanding real-time insights about customers. Has there been a SIM swap? Have they ported to another network? Has the number been recycled? You know, all of these events are critical for reinforcing and underpinning the network identity when you're going to build these kind of solutions. And the good news is, you know, we're fairly advanced now at building these APIs, real-time APIs, to surface this information both internally and externally. But also, I think we saw it as an opportunity to reach out into the wider ecosystem and look at other capabilities. And then we came across Doc Labs and Nick and the team. And look to put together a solution with a number of different technologies where we thought actually it made sense to really create a robust service and ecosystem where we could actually involve consumers in the loop as well and put privacy, you know, on a stronger footing. And I guess, you know, going back to 1992 and the years that followed, you know, we did have a trusted ecosystem, because in those days, we would have, you know, O2 and Vodafone and maybe T-Mobile when they came along. I was thinking about the UK. But, you know, most markets had 2 or 3 domestic carriers that eventually got connected to each other. And when the phone numbers were passed from one network to another, they could be trusted. And the reason for that was there was no global interconnect as such. You know, what has happened since those days, and especially in the UK, driven by our regulators. Our regulators insisted on having more and more competition, which means that, you know, we have to connect partners when they make a request, and it's a reasonable request, and that has, you know, generated the benefit of huge amounts of competition, lower prices for consumers, and all those good things that we all want. But it's also created, you know, very, very significant numbers of interconnects on a global basis from network to network, making it very hard for carriers to sometimes understand the origin. They obviously know the destination if they're the terminating carrier, but the origin of those calls or messages sometimes can be quite hard to trace. So that has taken us into a situation where, you know, scammers are exploiting, you know, gaps and loopholes in this global interconnected carrier network. And the power of that network, of course, is you can call anyone or message anyone anywhere on the globe simply by knowing their phone number. The downside of that is, with the advent of all this interconnect and all the other API-based services, scammers have managed to find ways into that, and they're exploiting that. And therefore, trust in our networks is declining, and so we're looking for new solutions under the GSMA United Against Scams banner and initiative to really bring back trust to the carrier networks for our core services, voice and messaging. And obviously, our subscribers are a key part of that. So this particular POC is all about call center authentication. So it's all about allowing the call center to authenticate you or me as we call into the call center, but I'm moving away from traditional technologies. The traditional technologies, as I mentioned, for doing this will be using CLI, which is having the phone number passed by the carrier network through the call center of the service provider, to the agent on their screen, so they can identify the customer in that way. That unfortunately it's quite easy to spoof those numbers these days. So there's no guarantee that the number presented to the agent or into the relying party will be the number that's calling into that call center. Of course, that's used alongside normally knowledge-based authentication, but I think it's pretty easy. I'm pretty sure that my name, address, date of birth, my first pet's name is widely available on the dark web now. Certainly based on the number of phishing attacks I get, most of which I don't respond to, then that data I assume is widely available, and therefore it's pretty easy for scammers to get past the security in the banks or any other relying party where there's value. If you want to get into British Airways and access my Avios balance or whatever else, there's plenty of, I think, relying parties that are much broader than finance. Healthcare, I think, is another one where it's very sensitive in terms of the data protection and the data that's stored by healthcare providers. I think there's many different verticals where call center authentication is vital that it's done in a very secure way, and actually more than that, and we'll come on to this, in a privacy preserving way for the subscribers. So just to sum up what we were trying to do with our solution, and obviously you'll get a demo in a minute, so you'll be able to kind of bring it to life a bit and then maybe ask any questions. But we're trying to achieve faster authentication, so to reduce the time it takes to authenticate callers. And a lot of that is about, eliminating or at least reducing the amount of knowledge-based authentication or one-time passcodes that are sent to customers. Much stronger security, so mitigating the known risks around SIM swap fraud, phishing, CLI spoofing, and stolen data. And as I mentioned, enhanced privacy. So actually leveraging some of the benefits of decentralized identity and verifiable credentials by allowing customers to share information with brands and relying parties, but without them having to actually share the actual data. So things like selective disclosure, which are really, I think, great features of the VC technology. We really wanted to demonstrate that as well.
Thank you, Glenn. And just kind of jumping in, you notice the changing color of the slide. So GSMA, obviously, as Glenn mentioned, we're part of this project. So these are not my slides, but they're certainly part of the story and the context for why this solution and why we think it's important. In terms of just volumes of scam threat, what they're seeing across the globe is $1 trillion worth of scams in 2024. And circa 25% of unknown calls or scams or fraud. And looking at my own phone, it seems like 75% are scams or fraud. It seems to be a kind of growing problem. So it's definitely a situation that's already quite bad and not getting better anytime soon. There's also a kind of hidden cost behind this, an emotional cost, I guess, that victims would feel. And so you can see some of the stats there, but even people getting depressed or losing sleep, I guess, if the results are particularly bad. So there's an economic impact for kind of fraud, obviously, and then there's a kind of emotional one as well, which we shouldn't discount. And then also, as GSMA point out with this slide, there's actually the people that are kind of forced to work in these scam centers. So there's a kind of probably a hidden set of victims in here that are actually helping people carry out these scams and these fraud attacks. So there's a lot of different perspectives here, and the last few were brought to us by GSMA. So what we'll do now is we'll run through the demo. Glenn and I were going to risk a live demo, but we kind of bottled out the last minute and just trying to get things configured. So what we're showing is a kind of video. The demo is quite short, so it'll just take about a minute and a half, and there's some other kind of music besides. So I'll let that run just now.
For test results, press 3. For all other inquiries, press 4. Before we can discuss your account, we need to verify your identity for security purposes. You should now receive a notification on your mobile device in the TrueVera Wallet app. Please open the notification and confirm your identity by clicking the Confirm button. Thank you. Your identity has been verified successfully. Please hold while we connect you to one of our healthcare advisors.
So that's it. It's very, very quick. And I guess it's kind of like payment for not being able to actually run the demo live. If anyone who's based in the UK or Spain is wanting to actually participate in the POC, maybe you can get your email address and things to Eric, and then we'll be able to kind of set you up inside the POC if you want to try it out for yourself. Just and those specific countries, just because of the carrier coverage that we have. But and we'll talk a little bit more about what was the technology that was in part of that the POC. And really what we're doing there is when a user calls a call center, they would have previously gone through a kind of onboarding flow with, let's call it Telefonica, which O2, sorry, which is one of Telefonica's brands in the UK. And during that onboarding flow, they can be set up and have their account mapped to a wallet address. And that can be a wallet address that in the POC it was a separate application, but probably when we expect to see this at production scale, likely this will be an SDK that's embedded inside the carrier's own app. So this will hopefully be an app that they would have already, and then an address associated with their account. And so when they set that up, they are sent an O2 customer credential. And when they then phone up the call center, that one of two things can happen. So in the example that we showed in the POC and the way the POC actually runs, if you try it for yourself, is that we send a DIDCOM message, a push notification to the caller's wallet address, and they are then notified about that. And it literally says, as you could see, are you calling the call center? And they reply and obviously send a DIDCOM message back confirming that that is their account. We also, as part of the POC, just to prove that we could do it as well, because it opens up a lot more interesting use cases, is we actually also put a credential inside that wallet as well. We used the DIGCOM message just to show that we could do that, but also it was literally one less click than using a credential presentation. So we went with the kind of simplest and cleanest UX that we could to show how easily this could be implemented. But actually, you could also just do this through a credential as well. But what we like about this, and the reason I kind of tend to call it a kind of Trojan horse, is certainly for the last 6 years or so through Doc Labs, we've spoken to a lot of different companies, lots of different use cases about how we put credentials and wallets and that type of technology inside of either their organization or out to their customers who could be end users. And often the challenge there is how hard it is to make people aware of this technology, how hard it is to educate people. And often that can be, at least I've found, the factor that can scare people away. And they'll say, well, I'll do it after someone else is doing it. I'll come back next year when, EIDAS 2 is in and people are starting to use wallets more readily using this type of technology. But actually, I like this use case so much because it actually gets users using wallets in an extremely simple use case. And if we think about instead of a DIGCOM message, actually a credential request being sent to the user's phone, and the user clicking yes, I'm speaking to you, and sending a cryptographically signed presentation back to the call center operator, you've actually started to get potentially at significant scale credentials and wallets and users actually using them in kind of production environments. And as I was saying there, like the O2 wallet penetration, I think Glenn, if I'm not giving the game away here, Glenn, but I think we're kind of wondering like what's the distribution like of wallets, our applications in this case. And And I think Glenn was kind of the view about maybe 3/4 that, 70 or 75% of monthly subscribers were actually regularly using the mobile app. And so the distribution there is actually pretty strong. And so you can actually have pretty big scale. I think O2's customer base in the UK for that type of subscriber is about 15 million. So you can start to get a sense of what that is. That's one carrier, and that's the lead carrier inside that country. Within the UK, they would obviously have, provide similar services to virtual carriers as well. And so that base could be much, much bigger. And that's why I think this use case is particularly exciting beyond a telecoms person, which I'm not. Like, I'm more interested, or my background is more in decentralized identity, and that's why I have found this particularly kind of interesting as well. But it's not all, it's life is a box of chocolates, as they say, and it's there's still some challenges to overcome with this. Like Glenn and I talk about, like, do carriers want to be verifiable credential issuers? They're concerned about how that would work, or educating users, or any liabilities that might involve. We need to make sure that the wallet address is assigned to a user as the onboard, which is a little bit more simple. But what would you do with existing customers? How do you manage that process? So there's still some things to overcome, and there's more besides that. But I just think it's a really, really useful use case, and a potential for mass adoption if you're coming from the kind of verifiable credential side. And then it's what this builds into, like, what can we do now? And that's why we put the credential in there. That's why we didn't just go with the DIDCOM message, is that it opens up lots more use cases. I'll not touch on all of these, but I mean, you can get to the point where carriers can start to become potential identity as a service providers if they have a high degree of confidence in the data that they have. They have definitely unique data that other organizations don't have. They probably know your address in most cases. They probably know how well you pay your bills, or they should do. They know your mobile number, which is quite powerful in and of itself. And so you can start to layer other information on top of that, and potentially, with the user's consent, start to sell that data into other use cases. You can also get partner onboarding and things like that as well. So if Telefónica or O2 were to do a partnership with someone like Spotify, maybe they can have something where there's 20% off Spotify subscriptions for O2 customers. That type of stuff obviously happens today, but there's quite a high instance of fraud. Again, people claiming to be O2 customers that aren't, and how does Spotify verify that? Well, actually, here would be a nice use case of using credentials to do that. And you could, pass that amongst your partners. Even things like delegated authority, which is becoming more and more, everyone's talking about agents these days. And so you could even start to have a customer credential as one evidence of who someone is, and potentially start to delegate some of that authority to an agent down the road as well. So there's lots of opportunities that exist now that we have some of these core kind of tools in place. And just because this is a group, I imagine, that is kind of well versed in kind of standards and things, I thought it'd be important just to quickly highlight, at least from the Truvera, the Doc Lab stack that was used during this demo. We are using kind of W3C credentials here, JSON LD. We're using a couple of different DID methods. We use the checked blockchain, which is a third-party blockchain to us, and we also can use DID key as well. And then we also, as I said, the transfer protocol we used was DIDCOM for the messaging, and then we also use OpenID Connect for issuance and kind of presentation of that credential, where that to be used. So hopefully that kind of gives some insight into the kind of tool set that we use there. So I don't know if you want us, Glenn, we've got a few more slides there, but I don't know if you would stop and try and maybe gather up some initial questions just now, before we kind of move into the kind of what happened and lessons learned. Maybe a good point to pause.
Yep, sounds good, Nick. If there's any questions, please send them our way.
I've got a first question, and it has to do with the actual experience, the user experience. How did you go about deciding what was the best way to present that message to the caller? Because one of the problems that or one of the challenges we see is trying to remove friction, but when you remove all the friction, then you've got a customer who's like, well, where's the security? I don't feel secure. It feels too smooth, and I don't see that there's any checks that are being done. And so, did you guys run workshops or user experience feedback, or did you kind of just go through iterations on your own to find out what would be the best presentation method?
Yeah, it was mostly. Glenn, did
Go
you
on.
want to go?
Yeah, no, please go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, it was, we didn't go through workshops. It really was something we pulled together quite in an agile way. And we kind of really went with the view that part of the thing we're trying to find out in this POC, Eric, was to actually find out like what was that user experience like. And we've obviously got some feedback forms that we're still going through that came in. So actually, we got it into, we worked on the least friction possible was really the way that we went about this, just to show what it could do. And I think that from my own experience, credentials and wallets, they often put technology at the forefront. And I guess we're ultimately trying to hide them somewhat to make sure that people didn't actually really know even what they were using. So it was just trying to make it as simple as possible. And that's, like I said, the reason that we went, to get even just remove one click, we went to the DIGCOM message as opposed to the verifiable credential, because it just made that use case just as fast as possible. So there wasn't a great amount of early feedback before we went into the POC. With what we had, we literally just tried to make it as simple as we could. And then we're kind of still going through the feedback from the POC now through the feedback forms that we've been receiving.
Yeah, and I guess to add to that, we've had some good feedback so far, and it is just a POC, right? So this is the first iteration. So, no doubt we will capture more user feedback and we will iterate on the user experience and make it better and better. I think, you're right, Eric. There's a good level of friction, and it's always quite hard to find what that good level is. I think the other main feedback I have had, and I guess it's my personal experience as well, for those of us that use open banking, which is quite well deployed in the UK, actually, and other European markets now as well. A lot of people have said, well, actually, it seems similar to the open banking experience where I get taken out of the relying party to my banking app, I authorize the transaction, and I go back to the relying party to complete the transaction. So the experience here actually is very similar to that. And we'll talk about where we want to deploy this probably in the next couple of slides in the carrier app. But I think it's kind of familiar to a lot of people from those kind of experiences already.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the sort of hopping back. I think that it seems that the hopping back and forth between apps is something that is confusing, and it's not. I mean, it's not even this use case. It's other use cases where, like, now go here. Okay, now go here, and you got to get lost. And I think working through that, as Neil says, in the chat is, is this going to be a new pattern that we need to get used to? And when it's the first time you're confronted with a new pattern, you're not sure if this is going to be repeatable. And so I personally just wondering, is this going to be the sort of the new normal where we're flipping back and forth between apps, or whether they're sort of streamlined into the app that you're actually using? So
One thing we did, and Glenn and I have spoken about, is actually, well, if you can get one of the kind of major like Google or Apple on board, it would almost be, can you actually embed it in the dialer itself?
yeah.
That might be a way around actually even needing a kind of wallet there. But of course, it needs those companies to want to play ball. And although I don't have direct experience, I understand that they would certainly be keen to charge for the distribution that they could provide. But I think that would potentially get away from needing to come outside of the actual dialing on your phone. But I think it would be probably a long time to get that implemented.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think there's the privacy angle as well. We probably could do it in a more B2B way without involving the customer. Maybe not necessarily using verifiable credentials. But I think, one of the things we wanted to discover and demonstrate in the POC was that actually the customer is at the center of the management and control of their own data now. we can argue whether that's a good thing and whether people are interested at all in that or not. And I think a lot of them are not. And that's the friction that they don't want. But on the other hand, it is allowing them to choose how their data is used and putting them very much in control of it. So it's changing the model there.
Carly.
Yeah, I was just thinking about I'm blanked on the question. Let me see if I can get it back again. Oh yeah, if I'm in charge of my data, one of the things I'm worried about is like, oh, I have something that's valuable that indicates who I am. That's a security nugget. Am I really talking to you or am I talking to a scammer? And we talked about this in the chat about different ways to do that. So just as like, for example, I got an email from somebody and I was like, I have no idea what this is. And then I had to go to their webpage and fill out a form and say, is this person really a person at your organization? Because you didn't even have an org chart online, So, and then they had to be like, oh yeah, it's real, it's this and that. So before I give away information, I kind of want to double check who I'm giving it to.
Yeah, and I think that probably if you think about how knowledge-based authentication is today, Carly, you're potentially giving information to random information to someone who you don't know in a call center, and likely if you've called them, you at least know who it is. But I think here you would be receiving a notification from an action that you're currently involved in, and hopefully from a known company. So this would be something that as you go through the onboarding flow with Telefonica, for example, there would be a wallet address associated and presumably some knowledge of that at that point in time. And then when you receive a notification on your phone, literally whilst you're on the call, which the call center operative can also say, look, I'm just sending you through this message confirming you are who we think you are. I think that will give you that kind of level of confidence that there's multiple factors there that you're getting, who you're speaking to, and I think that then you could very quickly authenticate yourself with the credential, the DIGCOM message. So I think yeah.
Because I was getting like, Visa calls you and you're like, I have said on the phone, I said, you know what I'm going to do? Give me your agent number or the conversation number. I'm going to hang up and I'm going to call Visa and then we'll see if we continue this conversation. So if they were like, oh, we'll send you some information, I'll be like, yeah, sure you are. I'm going to hang up and call and then we'll try it again.
Yeah, sounds very wise, Carly. I would do the same, I think. But I think, the general point from the telecoms perspective is, we want to uplift our capabilities such that you can prove that you are who you say you are, whether you're a consumer or a brand or a relying party. So two-way communications in a cryptographically secure way, in a deterministic way, and that is not possible today. So, this project and a number of other projects, another one which is called Open Verifiable Communications, where Eric's involved as well, is all about building that cryptographically secure capability from relying parties and call centers calling consumers, and this project is obviously identifying and providing capability the other way around. So I think overall what we want to get to is cryptographically secure voice and messaging two-way on all carrier networks. Now, it's easy for me to say that. It's not a small thing. We're doing a lot of probabilistic solutions today, which have actually been quite impactful in the market in reducing scams and fraud. But I think for me, it's on the journey towards cryptographically secure, and that's the final destination, which will take some time to reach, but it's certainly the strategy of the industry to get there.
Real quick clarification question, because when you say call center, a lot of times we don't realize we're talking to a call center, right? So if I call my bank, that's the bank. To me, I'm calling my bank, but that's a call center that's behind there that's managing all that. So I think for us who are not part of the telco system, we think, well, how often do I call a call center?
So if you've got a phone, any brand you're calling, whether it's your bank, whether it's the HMRC for taxes, or whether it's your healthcare provider, this is a solution that will work for all of those, and the idea is we implement it in all call center as a service technology solutions. In fact, for the POC, we integrated with Amazon Connect, which is one of the leading ones but there are many out there.
Right. Okay.
All right, Glenn, will I pass back to you to get into what actually happened in the POC and what's our experience been so far?
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, so short summary of where we got to with the POC. I think, we did prove that the use case was really well understood, and I think made sense to most people. A lot of us call brands every day, and we have to go through this frustrating process of proving that we are who we say we are with mostly knowledge-based information, which takes a long time and it's not always successful. Takes up to 5 minutes in some cases. So we've proven that actually we can reduce that authentication time period and do it in a more secure way to less than 60 seconds. And we've done that in over 500 calls with 70 demos given at the Mobile World Congress when we were showing it on the demo day in Barcelona. So I think it has generated huge interest amongst relying parties and call centers and service providers, as well as people in the wider industry. So it's been, I think, successful for what we wanted to achieve for the first stage, and now we need to kind of take it to the next stage. And that is really looking at it from, I guess, 3 angles. And the first one is the commercial perspective. I think, with all of these things, we can demonstrate technology and get good feedback for it, and even get consumers engaged in it. But actually, there needs to be a business case for people in the ecosystem, the partners in the ecosystem, to participate and build this as a long-standing ecosystem where everyone can actually extract some value. Now, I guess from the carrier perspective, and I think this is a general point actually, not just for carriers, it's a general point for wallets and credentials, is there has to be some sort of incentive for issuers to issue, and those incentives do not exist today. And that is why, predominantly, in my opinion, we only see government wallets and government initiatives offering government services. What has been lacking in the European identity wallets, but also in many other countries and regions, there's a distinct lack of engagement with private sector and commercial players who I think many would be very willing to issue credentials, telcos included. But there's a cost to doing so, and it's not a core part of our business today. So we'll be looking to find a business case for us to cover the costs of deploying this technology, such that it made an ecosystem work for us in the long term. So I guess one of the next steps we're doing in the project is we're looking at the cost model and some potential revenue models of how we can extract some value. Obviously, we want value for our subscribers as well. And we want value for the relying parties and technology providers like Doc Labs. From the tech perspective, I actually think in some ways this is quite a challenging one. We've obviously demonstrated the tech, and we spun up this POC very quickly, actually, including the call center part, including the Doc Labs part, and the wallet and the credential part, very very simply, and the integration with the carrier network. But actually, I think it's not quite clear what's happening in the evolution of wallets and credentials, other than the government initiatives, which are very well known. I think like I said, the private sector has had really no input into this. Apple is playing with this a little bit in the US, in allowing consumers to put identity credentials in their OEM wallets, and others are playing around with this stuff. But I guess we're thinking about what is the end state for this kind of technology. Is it going to be about wallets that are downloaded by consumers? Probably not. The consumers don't really have much interest in downloading things because it gets in the way of them doing stuff. Is it about native wallets? So I guess we're talking about predominantly Apple and Google, but other device vendors who are building wallets natively in their operating systems. That works really well from a consumer perspective. We're obviously all very used to that from having boarding passes and loyalty cards, hotel keys, even in our native wallets, and that stuff works really well because you know where it is, and you know where to get it, and you know where it's going to be on your phone. So you could say, to Nick's point earlier, why not put carrier phone number credential in the native wallet? I think we need to see where that might take us. Government wallets, we could put our credentials in a government wallet. It doesn't seem there's much interest from government to do that at the moment. They seem to be trying to keep the private sector out, which probably is a little short-sighted. And then we've got alternative solutions which we could deploy, things like our number verify SIM-based APIs, which would probably take away from some of the or many of the benefits of deploying VC-based technology, where you've got things like selective disclosure and all the other benefits that come from involving the customer in the journey, albeit with a little bit of friction. So yeah, a big focus for the next step for the project will be analysing the different technical solutions with a particular focus, I guess, on the wallets and where the credentials go and how that works with other ecosystem players. And I guess finally, we'll need to do a lot of work on the privacy, security, and trust perspective. I think I talked at the beginning, and Nick mentioned the scams that are happening and the trust that's declining in the carrier networks and voice and messaging. So, it's compelling for us to invest in these technologies, but not at any cost. Obviously, I think we've seen with Stir Shaken in the US that the cost to the carriers was very, very high, and the benefits maybe haven't flowed through in the way that was expected. So we want to avoid that situation again, certainly in Europe. And we need to see that whether consumers really want to adopt this technology, and maybe the government wallets will help with that from a kind of halo perspective and education perspective. I think they probably will, to get consumers more used to using credentials on their phones, maybe in native apps, maybe not even in dedicated wallets. So I think that's going to help us quite a lot. But I would say do consumers really care about their security and privacy? Probably not very much. Probably more than they used to, given all the scams and frauds that are happening. I think if you talk to a lot of our customers, they probably assume that if something does go wrong, someone's going to pick up the tab, either the bank or the telco, or maybe even the relying party or the networks in terms of the credit and debit cards. So I think there's a lot of complacency by customers. They just want to get on and get stuff done, buy those tickets, go on that trip, and actually stuff that gets in their way, I think they find annoying and frustrating. So I know all of us probably on this call, are very focused on privacy and security. I wouldn't say that's so well understood by most consumers.
Are you guys, sometimes it thinks that there's all this work and infrastructure and years of development, and it just gets boiled down to like a feature, like if you've got the Telefónica app, and then all of a sudden you've got a new feature that appears and we want to put it front and center. Look, there's a great thing with all these capabilities, where all the capabilities, like you guys mentioned, the technology is hidden, it's behind the scenes, and what's important is the value that it adds to the interaction or whatever, and it just shows up as a tiny little icon or feature that most of us don't know about. And so have you explored looking at the having some of the app costs, the Telefonica app, say, take on some of these costs of development or host or whatever, or you're replacing some of the things that exist now, and there might be a transition period, but you're going to be eventually doing things a different way, and so those costs. I think this is the hardest part for you guys, that you've shown that it has value, economic value, but still you need to get it into the ecosystem.
Yeah, no, we need to get it into the ecosystem, into our apps. I think it reminds me of a famous Steve Jobs quote, which was, "Technology should be beautiful or it should be invisible."
Mm-hmm.
I think we're probably moving more towards the invisible here, at least as far as the distribution into the carrier apps and integration into the carrier apps. And I like your idea of just that new feature that suddenly just appears in the app, Eric. So I think that is somewhere we want to go, but we need to be mindful of the costs.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the costs are internal costs today, so we do a lot of our own software development. Obviously, a lot of the carrier apps are about checking your bill and maybe getting in contact with customer service with any queries. Sometimes there's some kind of customer offers in there as well that takes you to those. But I think it's great to provide more utility in that app.
Mhm.
So having that new feature, I think, could be quite powerful from that perspective. But we do want to do so in a cost-effective way as well. So we can't be I guess having massive increase in costs for the sake of adding that new feature.
I think as well, like part of Glenn and I kind of working together on this. Obviously, Glenn's got very much a carrier perspective, but we also look at contact center as a service, the CCaaS providers as well. They would also be and they're also interested in this technology, and they will have different priorities. Obviously, all of the above are businesses, and they'll be looking for kind of revenue cost saving opportunities. But I think each organization and sector will have a different perspective about how you can generate that revenue or how you generate that cost saving. So I think there's kind of multiple kind of angles here for us to try and see if we can make the business case work, because clearly, as is often the case, the technology implementation, whilst not trivial, can often be something that gets solved quite early on, and it's getting the business and the legal and the compliance stuff that follows lined up so it can actually be rolled out at scale. So I think those are the challenges that we certainly still face. As an interesting point, I see the question in from Neil, which I think kind of links back to, I think this is a two-way street. And so you have the notion that, the call centers want to know who's calling into them, and that's absolutely the way it should be, and we should make that easier for the users. But of course, like, we're all consumers as well, and I'm sure we get all, way too many calls that sometimes our phone flags up as suspect spam, and we also really want to know who's calling us, which is other part of the coin, really. And I know, Glenn, you're working as some of the other people in this group are on, I think it's OVM, is it, which is another
OVC.
OVC, apologies, where it's trying to
Yeah.
identify the company calling, which I think Neil's to your point.
Yeah. And in fact, we've already started that journey in our messaging service, which is called RCS, or you might have heard RBM, which is the enterprise messaging capability that we've now launched, which is an evolution of SMS. So it's kind of like a WhatsApp experience on your phone, but native from your carrier. It's available on all our iPhone and Android devices from most carriers globally now. And that has one new feature, which is called verified sender. And verified sender allows you to check who the sender is, and it's got a little green tick, and it'll tell you that the carrier has verified and vetted the sender of that message before it arrives on your device. So I think we are starting that journey, and we've got production deployments of that with many big brands in many of our markets. So yes, we are very much incentivized, I think, and motivated to move to a situation where we've got that capability to do verified voice and messaging from brands to consumers and vice versa, and ideally in a cryptographically secure way.
Excellent. Well, we've got a couple more minutes, so if we probably have time for one last question, if anyone has. No governance questions from Scott.
Maybe just a statement that hopefully these technologies will turn phones from hated devices to useful technologies again.
You hate your
people,
phones, and people love their phones.
I love my phone except for phone calls.
Well, I mean, Carly, it's very much our mission to bring trust back to communications. I mean, this is one of the proof points and evidence points, and there's a whole bunch of work going on in the industry, in the telcos, in GSMA behind that project. So yes, that is our mission. Absolutely, it won't happen overnight, but we're going to get there, I do believe.
Fantastic.
So I can make a couple of comments. I can make just comment with the 1 minute we have left. So, based in Seattle, I do have some contacts with T-Mobile, and I know that they're doing a lot really to address security. Close friend was in the security task force there. The challenge exists not necessarily bringing the technology, it's getting people to agree to the governance. To come and sit down and figure out how we're going to address this collaboratively. And that, in a variety of different arenas that we're dealing with, that is going to be the sticky point. I think the technology is now, reaching achievability. The question is now is, relying parties and governing authorities going to, take the chance and start putting in governance systems to manage these things?
Compliance. Yeah, I think a lot of what's pushing this is the regulatory obligations, right? That are saying, guys, fix this, do something. So I think that's spurring a lot of this development on. But we're out of time, so I think we'll just close it. And thank you for all the comments. Thank you for the presentation, Nick and Glenn. And thanks. The recording will be posted in the next couple of days. And in 2 weeks, again, the meeting will be a biometrics. It'll be an open but sort of structured conversation on biometrics in digital trust ecosystems. So we'll see you in 2 weeks, and we'll close the meeting now. And thanks once again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Have a good week.